Most controversial president of the Philippines. The most controversial president of the Philippines is widely considered to be Ferdinand Marcos, who served as the country's leader from 1965 to 1986. Marcos is known for his authoritarian regime, corruption, and human rights abuses, including the imposition of martial law in 1972, which lasted for more than a decade. During his tenure, Marcos accumulated enormous wealth for himself and his family, while many Filipinos lived in poverty. He also silenced political opposition and restricted civil liberties, resulting in numerous arrests, detentions, and disappearances of activists and journalists. Marcos was eventually ousted from power in 1986, following the Peaceful People Power Revolution, which was a mass movement of Filipinos protesting against his regime. Despite his controversial legacy, some Filipinos still consider Marcos a hero and support his family's political ambitions. Ferdinand Marcos is considered by many to be the most controversial president in the history of the Philippines due to the extensive human rights abuses, corruption, and authoritarian regime that characterized his 21-year tenure in office. Marcos was elected president in 1965 and was re-elected in 1969, 1973, and 1981. One of the most significant events of Marcos' presidency was the imposition of martial law in 1972, which lasted for more than a decade. The declaration of martial law gave Marcos near absolute control over the government and allowed him to silence political opposition and restrict civil liberties. Many activists and journalists were arrested, detained, and disappeared during this period, while others were tortured or killed. Marcos also used his power to accumulate enormous wealth for himself and his family. It is estimated that he and his wife, Imelda Marcos, amassed billions of dollars through corruption and embezzlement. The Marcos family's extravagant lifestyle, including Imelda's infamous collection of thousands of pairs of shoes, was a stark contrast to the poverty experienced by many Filipinos. Despite the widespread human rights abuses and corruption during Marcos' presidency, some Filipinos still view him as a hero. This is partly due to the economic development that took place during his tenure, as well as the infrastructure projects he implemented, such as the construction of roads, bridges, and public buildings. However, many others view Marcos' legacy as a stain on Philippine history, and his regime is often cited as an example of how authoritarianism can lead to widespread abuse of power and human rights violations. Marcos was eventually ousted from power in 1986, following the Peaceful People Power Revolution, which saw millions of Filipinos take to the streets to protest against his regime. In the years since Marcos' ouster, his family has attempted to rehabilitate his image and return to power. Marcos' son, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., has run for several political offices and has even been elected to the Philippine Senate. However, the family's political ambitions continue to be controversial, with many Filipinos arguing that they should be held accountable for the abuses and corruption that took place during Marcos' presidency. During Marcos' presidency, he also faced several high-profile crises and conflicts. In 1975, the Philippine government signed a peace agreement with the Moro National Liberation Front, MNLF, which aimed to address the long-standing issue of Muslim separatism in the southern Philippines. However, the agreement was not fully implemented, and conflict between the Philippine government and various Muslim separatist groups continued. Marcos also faced criticism for his handling of the economy, particularly in the 1980s. The Philippine economy suffered from high inflation and debt during this period, which was exacerbated by the global economic downturn. The government's response to the crisis included austerity measures and the devaluation of the Philippine peso, which led to further economic hardship for many Filipinos. In 1983, the assassination of opposition leader Benigno Aquino Jr. sparked widespread protests and political unrest, which continued until Marcos' ouster in 1986. Aquino's death was widely believed to have been orchestrated by Marcos' government, which further eroded public trust in the regime. Following Marcos' ouster, a new constitution was ratified, and democratic elections were held. However, the legacy of Marcos' regime continued to be felt in Philippine politics, with corruption and human rights abuses remaining persistent problems. Despite the controversy surrounding his presidency, some Filipinos continue to view Marcos as a symbol of strong leadership and economic development. However, many others argue that his regime was characterized by corruption, abuse of power, and disregard for human rights. The debate over Marcos' legacy continues to be a topic of contention in Philippine politics and society. During his presidency, Ferdinand Marcos implemented a number of projects and initiatives aimed at modernizing and developing the Philippines. One of his major projects was the Green Revolution, which aimed to increase agricultural productivity and promote self-sufficiency in food production. Here is an overview of the Green Revolution and its key components. Land reform. Marcos implemented a comprehensive land reform program aimed at breaking up large estates and distributing land to small farmers. The program also included the establishment of agricultural cooperatives to help farmers increase their productivity and income. Irrigation development. To increase agricultural productivity, Marcos invested heavily in the development of irrigation systems, particularly in rice-growing areas. The government constructed dams, canals, and other infrastructure to improve water distribution and increase crop yields. Fertilizer subsidies. Marcos implemented a fertilizer subsidy program to provide farmers with affordable access to fertilizers, which were essential for improving crop yields. Seed production. To ensure that farmers had access to high-quality seeds, the government established a national seed production program. The program aimed to develop new varieties of crops that were better suited to local conditions and could withstand pests and diseases. Mechanization. Marcos also encouraged the adoption of modern farming technologies, such as tractors and other machinery. The government provided subsidies to farmers to purchase equipment and provided training on how to use the machinery. The Green Revolution was a major success, with agricultural productivity and output increasing significantly during Marcos's presidency. The program helped to reduce poverty in rural areas and promote economic development in the Philippines. However, it was not without its controversies, with some critics arguing that it favored large landowners and did not do enough to address the root causes of poverty in rural areas. Infrastructure development. Marcos invested heavily in infrastructure development, including the construction of new highways, bridges, airports, and seaports. He also initiated the development of the Bataan nuclear power plant, which was controversial due to safety concerns and was never fully operational. Education reform. Marcos implemented a number of education reforms, including the establishment of the National College of Business and Arts and the Philippine Science High School. He also increased government funding for education and implemented a program to distribute textbooks to students in public schools. President Ferdinand Marcos launched the Green Revolution program in the Philippines in the 1970s. The program aimed to increase the country's agricultural productivity and reduce its dependence on imported food. The Green Revolution program included the distribution of high-yielding rice varieties, the use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides, and the construction of irrigation systems. These efforts were intended to increase agricultural productivity and boost food production. While the Green Revolution program did result in an increase in agricultural productivity and a reduction in the country's reliance on imported food, it also had negative consequences. The use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides led to environmental degradation and health problems. Small farmers were also often unable to afford the high cost of the new technologies, which led to increased inequality in the agricultural sector. Overall, the Green Revolution program had both positive and negative effects on Philippine agriculture and society. Its legacy is still being debated and discussed today.